Yes, indeed, folks. It is hot and it is messing us up here in Las Vegas. Welcome to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani, also on Twitter and Periscope. At Vin Armani is my handle there. And we are also streaming live on the Facebook page of our wonderful content partner, Activist Post. That's facebook.com/Activist Post. Well, it's 10 a.m. and it's already very, very hot here in fabulous Las Vegas. I had the equipment turned off because our studio's hot, and we have turned off our air conditioning so that we can have a nice, quiet studio and wonderful audio for all of you. So if you see me start sweating or Christians start to sweat, then just know we're like Baptist preachers in here, and we're doing it just for you guys. We've got a great show today, though. Great show. Our guest today is Lori Harfenist. Most of you may know her as the resident from RT America. She's usually totally on point, not even usually, she's always totally on point with her commentary on current affairs, but some of you may not know that she is also a huge space buff. She's a science fiction author, and she is big on all things space, both private and public, and has a great passion for it. So I wanted to have her on. We're going to talk space. It's a topic that I love and have since I was a kid, and I follow, but it's rare on a show like this to get a chance to talk about it. But some interesting things happened this week, so it's absolutely perfect. Also this week, we had the return of fake news. And so we want to do a little story about that, the lead up, the Trump body slam of CNN, etc. Also, some news about this interesting story that came out of the EU with them fining Google. And we want to talk about that as well, and to pick up a story that we were trying to get into last week, but did not have the time, but we'll definitely talk about, and that is what's going on in Syria, because it's just about to heat up. So in some ways, it's good that we didn't cover it last week. There's a lot to go over, and to help me go over all of that, to suffer through the sweltering Vegas heat with me, my good friend, producer and co-host, Mr. Christian Reyes. Christian, good morning.
Good morning.
Dude.
Yeah.
Are we going to do this? Are we going to get through it?
We're going to do it. It's going to be good.
Oh, man. So, great week for news.
Yeah.
Already, as we called it with the weed in Nevada, it was a complete debacle.
Dude,
no distributors opened. People were standing in line. Sales tax, just starting to get the pictures of the receipts back. Sales tax, total, almost at 100%. You're almost paying double.
Wow.
Double the retail rate.
That's crazy.
There's going to be a lot of people who will be like, well, who voted for this, who are going to be like, oh, well, I hope my street dealer doesn't go out of business because I'm just going to keep using my normal guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, seriously.
Well, we don't have a ton of time. And I want to spend plenty of time with Lori because we have not talked about space.
Yeah, this is going to be great.
We have not talked about it at all on the show, and she is like way up on it.
Yeah.
I wish I was a little more up on the space stuff because it's very interesting, and I think it's that story that's hiding underneath everything that SpaceX, especially Elon Musk, as usual, has made some great progress, and the government has now decided, oh, never mind, we want back in. So we're going to talk about that. Let's just jump right into this, dude, because so that we can power through, because I think a lot of this is related. This is going to be a great episode and a great display of crypto savagery, because this was a week with news that really showed the old culture for being what it is, and we're going to dig into it. Let's talk about this first news story. This one really blew me away. I actually could not believe this when I read it. And I think that it does have something to do with the idea that there is an emergent new culture, but there is the sort of what you might call the technological vestige of the old culture, like the pinnacle of the old culture, which is the internet and the big internet companies, which is private space travel like SpaceX, the end of the sort of centralized corporate technological pinnacle. Google by far represents in every domain that. And this interesting story came from out of the EU. This is the EU Google story. Google fined a record 2.4 billion euros by the EU over search engine results. This is from The Guardian. The European Union has handed Google a record-breaking 2.42 billion euro fine for abusing its dominance of the search engine market and building its online shopping service in a dramatic decision that has far-reaching implications for the company. By artificially and illegally promoting its own price comparison service in searches, Google denied both its customers real choice and rival firms the ability to compete on a level playing field, European regulators said. The Silicon Valley giant has 90 days to stop its illegal activities and explain how it will reform its ways or face fines of up to 10.6 million euros a day, which equates to 5% of the average daily worldwide turnover of its parent company, Alphabet. On the back of the finding that Google is the dominant player in the European search engine market, the EU regulator is further investigating how else the company may have abused its position, specifically in its provision of maps, images, and information on local services. Let's jump straight to this next one, because what I find interesting, very interesting, is the original title of this article. This is also The Guardian. Same day is opinion article by Antonio Garcia Martinez. The original title, and you know it's the original title because it still is, basically the URL is laid out that way. They must be using WordPress. Is by fining Google, Brussels bureaucrats show themselves to be absurd. Then what The Guardian changed it to was, Google's fine shows Europe is a brake on US tech innovation. Took out the absurdity. So, here's that opinion. Those who cannot innovate, regulate. Or so the European Commission again seemed to indicate, levying a truly Google-sized 2.4 billion euro fine on the search engine giant for purportedly showing its Google shopping results above its unpaid search listings. We've seen this Brussels Google movie before, and with depressing consequences. In 2014, Axel Springer, a German publisher, insisted that Google stop violating its copyright and cease showing snippets of its content in the Google News service. Google complied, and by Axel Springer's own report, inbound traffic fell by 80%, forcing it to rescind its complaint. Spain had an even tougher time of it. Shortly after the German fracas, a Spanish lobby group convinced the government to pass what amounted to a link tax, forcing Google to pay for the privilege of driving traffic to Spanish publishers, something most publishers would gladly pay to have. The company decided to simply pull out of Spain, causing a steep decrease in eyeballs, and eventually the same lobbying group clamored for Google to return. Despite initial appearances, the most recent court case is not a battle between a heartless American tech behemoth and some European small e-commerce retailer, many of whom are very content to sponsor their product listings on Google, but between two flavors of middleman. One, Google has invested billions in and profited by many billions from its market-beating search technology. The second, and chief complainant in this case, is a long since non-operational price comparison company. So Christian, basically what is being said here is wild, right? So we've complained about Google,
Yep.
right? We've complained about Google pulling certain sites
Right.
from out of their ad network. We've complained about the YouTube monetization and or censorship policies that Google has. But the one thing that we say at the end of every single, or the disclaimer that I always give, or at least I always try to give, because it's important, is, because again, it's principles over preferences, right? Our preference would be that Google behaved a little bit differently, but the principle is Google is a private company.
Yep.
Google owns its own servers. We choose to utilize Google services, which Google, by the way, is offering for free. Like, let's not forget that. We're streaming live on YouTube right now for free. Now, I've been doing live streaming for a very long time. And, 10 years ago, I had to have, to do what we're doing now, to the amount of viewers in the quality that we're doing, would have cost me, I would have had to have servers with bandwidth that would have ran probably $5,000 to $6,000 a month.
Wow.
And we're able to do it for free.
Yep.
And so they're giving a huge amount of value. Same
All
thing goes with
kinds
the
of
search,
value.
right?
Right.
But they make money by delivering ads. Their ad platform is their private property. It's on their servers. It's their algorithms. They are the ones who invested the money for the developers to create it. They have invested the money for the infrastructure that makes it run fast. They've got data centers all over the world that belong to them. They've put in the money. And essentially what the EU is saying is, Google, you are not a private company.
Wow.
You cannot promote your own products on your own private property.
Crazy.
This precedent is really, really dangerous. And I think people need to pay attention to this precedent because what it's saying is you can't promote on your website, you can't promote your own products. You have to promote other people's competitors' products
Right.
over your own.
In this article, the first thing it says was those that can't innovate, regulate.
Oh, that's for sure. That's for sure. Because those are the two. That's the means of competition, right? Well, it's the Austrian economics. You either have the economic means of competing or the political means of competing. The political means of competing is a gun. And that's what the EU is doing. They're basically playing a game of chicken in this scenario.
Yep.
I mean, it would be pretty wild. It would be pretty wild if Google just shut off to all of Europe. Like, that would be interesting.
Yeah.
If Google just said, okay, nobody in Europe can access any of our services. YouTube, search.
Wow.
I mean, that's putting the EU over a barrel right there. I mean, I don't think they'll do it because they'll lose a lot of money, but that would be the most gangsta move they could possibly pull. But the principle here is so bad. Like, it's the height of collectivism. And we saw it's important to keep in mind that there's two sides of the collectivism here. Like, one, there's the corporate collectivism, right? Google is a collective entity. It is a fake, it's a corporation. It's a fake entity, right? Individuals have to actually do the stuff, but it's like we're talking EU versus Google. But we're really not. There's individuals making these decisions. Like, they're hiding behind the EU, they're hiding behind Google, but it's individuals. Prime example of how collectivism is misunderstood was one of the funniest things that happened this week. So we're going to jump, because I do think that this really carries on. The theme of this whole story is recognizing collectivism. So we've got our first collectivism, both the EU and Google, collectivism. All right? Then the funniest thing that happened this week was this Trump. So Donald Trump tweets a video that some dude on Reddit had made that was a clip from him. You may not know this. Donald Trump is in the WWE Hall of Fame. 2013 inductee. There was a whole... He's been around the WWE since it was the WWF, professional wrestling, right? The dude's an entertainer. He's been around it for a long time, since the Hogan days. But there was a storyline with him and the head of WWE, Jim McMahon, where they were going to sort of face off, and the loser of this confrontation was going to have to shave their head. And Vince McMahon ended up having to shave his head. So that was a scene of Donald Trump basically clotheslining Vince McMahon and doing a little fake jabs and then walking away all gangsta. And somebody put the CNN, instead of Vince McMahon's head, they put the CNN logo, and Donald Trump thought it was funny. He tweeted it. It's fake news network. Now, the irony of this whole thing is that it's actually a really good joke, because wrestling is fake. Like, that clip is fake. It's staged. It's meant to be comical. Come on, Donald Trump is not a wrestler. Right? It's meant to be completely satire and funny, and I'm not defending Donald Trump. I don't like Donald Trump, but at least he's got a good sense of humor in this regard. And so the CNN thing, he's trying to say fake news, it's fake wrestling, and then I knew this was going to happen. So you've got, again, collectivism here. CNN is, again, a collective entity. It's not a real person, right? CNN is not a person. You can't do violence to CNN. You can only do violence or have threats against individual people, which Donald Trump has not done in this case. Like he did with the Morning Joe anchors, but that's a whole other story. But then you get this popping up from the Washington Post. Headline, Trump appears to promote violence against CNN with tweet. And I just want to say, if you are going to try to defend yourself from accusations of fake news, you don't defend it with fake news. Trump appears to promote violence against CNN. Okay, so first off, we know you can't actually be violent against CNN. CNN does not exist. You can be violent against an individual, but CNN is not an individual. You can't be violent against CNN. Second, that's not violence. The WWE is not violence. It's a stage show. Those guys are friends. It's a dance. It's no more violent than like some stage, sword fight. Two actors doing Hamlet sword fight, and then he kills somebody on stage, and the guy, oh, that's not violence. You can't have, but the thing is, it's not just Washington Post. Like, this thing is a virus, and this is what the fake news is. Like, it's a virus of just illogical and irrational shit. There were many of these, but this one was crazy to me, and I actually had to respond to this one on Twitter. This Ghosh guy, pop this up. So this guy, Enervon Ghosh, right, says, the President of the United States is encouraging violence, here's the best part, not just against a reputed news channel, but the entire free media. First off, again, it's not violence. Second off, you can't do violence to a news channel. You can't do violence to a news channel. And then the entire free media. What the fuck is that even? What is the free media in the first place? And then what's the entire free media? As though there's like some point. And how could you body slamming a very specific CNN and saying CNN, how is that a threat against all media? If I level a threat against one person, that's not a threat against all of humanity. And the thing is, these people who were doing this, you notice he had a blue check mark. Let's look at this dude's bio, because this is the scary part to me about this collectivism and how accepted it is. Let's look at this Ghosh bio. So, he's got the check mark. His work appears in Medium, Huffington Post, NPR, Forbes, The Street, DSA, Economic Times. He was previously in communications for SAP, Columbia Journal, Fulbright. He's a Fulbright speaker, which basically takes all of those institutions there and just makes them completely irrelevant. When people, this is fake news. This is fake news. And then it goes to, was Donald Trump right? Let's look at this CNN. This is from Activist Post. CNN's entire Russia narrative exposed as fake news for ratings. CNN isn't having a good week. First, 3 of their top reporters were fired for poor journalism, covering a story where Trump ally Anthony Scaramucci was accused of being under congressional investigation, which was retracted. Then Project Veritas leaked 2 conversations proving CNN's accusation of President Donald Trump colluding with Russia were baseless and used for ratings. With this 1-2 punch on CNN's admitted Russian hoax, they are almost certainly feeling the blowback from this latest scandal, and, according to James O'Keefe, it's just the start of more to come. What could include more tapes from CNN or other networks and newspapers like the New York Times. For months, Trump has accused CNN of being fake news, even singling out their reporter Jim Acosta. Monday, Project Veritas released a video of CNN supervising producer James Bonfield, who proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Now, here's what's dangerous about this, Christian. Here's what's dangerous about fake news and what's always been dangerous about fake news. We covered this. This was one of the stories when the show first started, right? Back in the fall.
Right.
We were covering this through the election significantly. We covered the Russia story. We covered the whole fake news thing. We were on the fake news list in terms of activist posts being on the top of fake news lists. The dangerous part about fake news that we've always said is it represents an excuse, not a reason, but an excuse for censorship. Now, from the beginning of even during the Enlightenment, from even the beginning founding documents of this country, the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. Freedom of the press. Why? Because that's something government has always tried to take away.
Yep.
Has always tried to take away. Now, there's a huge problem when you have journalists clamoring to censor speech. And that's fundamentally what they're doing by saying fake news or Donald Trump shouldn't be saying this. No, let Donald Trump say whatever the fuck he wants to say. At the end of the day, Donald Trump has to get elected in 4 years.
Yeah, exactly.
He has to get elected in 4 years. Let the market decide whether they like what he's saying or not. He doesn't need to be censored. The House is actually putting something in. They're going to try to use his tweets to get him removed from office based on the 25th Amendment. We'll maybe cover that next week to say that he's not mentally fit. But he's got to get reelected. If the people re-elect him based on what he's doing, then he's doing exactly what he needs to do. Otherwise, instead of railing and making up fake news and saying that Donald Trump is trying to incite violence, why don't you actually present what his policies are, what he's doing, and tell people that voting for him is not in their best interest and show them how, instead of wasting this ink? But no, they're not going to do that. Now, the dangerous thing about this is very much problem, reaction, solution, this fake news. Something you got to worry about. We've been talking about this in our editorial meetings with Activist Post, because this is something that I've been following as well. But it's important to know that this is a discussion that's being and has been had at the highest levels of government for a long time. Government would like to do censorship of the media. Government has always wanted to do censorship in the media. It's the nature of government. It's what every tyrant does. And we are in a different type of a tyranny. We're in a oligarchical, elitist, technocratic tyranny. Let's look back to 2013, the situation, which was even then, this is from McClatchy, from 2013. Senators spar over definition of, quote, journalist in seeking to protect them. The Senate Judiciary Committee, looking to provide protections for journalists and their sources, ran into a roadblock Thursday when lawmakers couldn't agree on the definition of, quote, journalist. Under the legislation, journalists wouldn't have to comply with subpoenas or court orders forcing them to reveal sources or confidential information unless a judge first determines there's reason to think that a crime has occurred and government officials have exhausted all other alternatives. It's the third time Congress has considered a shield law for journalists. Similar bills have failed despite bipartisan support. Quote, I'm hoping the third time's a charm, said Senator Patrick Leahy, Democrat from Vermont, the committee's chairman. The bill defines a journalist as a person who has a, quote, primary intent to investigate events and procure material, unquote, in order to inform the public by regularly gathering information through interviews and observations. The person also must intend to report on the news at the start of obtaining any protected information and must plan to publish that news. But senators disagreed on how to define journalists, since some thought the bill's definition wasn't specific enough. Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat of California, wondered whether it could be used to provide protections to employees of WikiLeaks, an organization that allows anonymous sources to leak information to the public. Quote, I'm concerned this would provide special privilege to those who are not reporters at all, she said. Feinstein suggested that the definition comprise only journalists who make salaries, saying it should be applied just to, quote, real reporters. The sponsor of the bill, Senator Charles Schumer, Democrat of New York, was against the idea since there are bloggers and others in the internet age who don't necessarily receive salaries. So during this time, the Electronic Freedom Foundation was in the hearing and they were live tweeting. If you want to show these EFF tweets, we'll just go through some of them to give an indication of what it looked like. So Senator Feinstein, in this is back September 2013, uses example of a 17-year-old high school dropout who starts his own website as someone who shouldn't be covered. Next. Amendment from Senator Sessions says there would be no protection for reporters who revealed classified information. Senator John Cornyn introduces amendment to limit the SHIELD law to members of the press who are Americans. So, Christian, what we're dealing with here is, once again,
censorship.
Well, it's censorship because preferences over principles. If the principle is, that seems the definition of journalist, that's the definition. A journalist is a person who has a primary intent to investigate events and procure material. That's a journalist. Someone who's getting information and reporting that information to the public. That's the principle. That covers everybody, whether you're paid, whether you're not paid, because look, it doesn't matter. Whether or not you are talented enough for someone to pay you to do that is not a matter of whether or not you're doing the thing. If you're playing basketball, you're a basketball player. It doesn't matter whether you're being paid to be a basketball player or not.
Right, exactly.
Because the principle is not, and especially the most important individuals are those who are, where the press is the most important, are those who are not getting paid to do it. All we have to go back to is the foundation of this country. You go back to the Federalist Papers and the Anti-Federalist Papers, the way that the philosophy behind the founding of this country was basically laid down was a series of op-ed pieces that guys were doing under pen names, that the founding fathers were basically arguing with each other in the newspapers. But they weren't getting paid. The newspapers weren't paying them to do that. This was how they were carrying that on. And certainly to say that WikiLeaks is not a journalistic organization, I don't even know how you come to that conclusion.
Right. If anything, it's the most.
So what that does is it's a preference, and it privileges those individuals who are getting salaried, presumably.
Yeah.
It privileges those who are most conducive to just parroting the government's position on things because they need the access.
Yep.
The professional reporters. And the other thing about it is, you take somebody like an Alex Jones, right? He's making millions of dollars per year. He has journalists on staff that he's paying. But when he started, and this is true for many people in independent media, if you're starting a news organization, you're not pulling a salary at the beginning. You're not getting paid at the beginning. You're not making money at the beginning.
Just like any business, too.
Any business.
Yeah.
That's the point. So they're basically saying, until your business is profitable, you're not a journalist. That doesn't make any sense. That's a principle that is not, they still hold you accountable as a business and accountable to your business license, even if you're not making a profit. It's a principle that just does not hold up anywhere else, but it's very important as we step into this fake news thing that it's principles over preferences, that we pick free speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion. Why? Why? Because now they're learning. You started that fake news shit. You started the fake news shit, Washington Post, CNN. They covered it plenty. Go back and watch our shows. It was all them. New York Times. They were the ones pushing it.
Pointing the finger. Yeah.
When it served their guy, or their woman, I should say. But you know what? You live by the sword, you die by the sword, because that's why you pick principles over preferences, because eventually the other guy's in power. The other side is in power. We know this historically. And you're going to be on the other side. You're going to be being called fake news by the person in power. Just like they were calling Alex Jones fake news. Now Alex Jones has a press pass to the White House. So That's what's sustainable. You pick principles over preferences every single time. Yeah, you lose a little bit in the short term, but you know what? It's your insurance policy in the long term.
Yep. Can't crack it.
Wisdom. That's the wisdom of it. So, also another principle, because we know this because history repeats itself. I want to talk a little bit about Syria. We've got the time. I want to spend a half hour on this, the collectivism involved. I want to go over the developments. It's news that is not being discussed. Talk about fake news. I mean, these CNN's reporting on Syria, New York Times reporting on Syria, Washington Post reporting on Syria. You're not going to hear any of the shit that we're about to talk about on this show that is the real story of what's going on in northern Syria, and it's going to bug you out. It's going to bug everybody out who's listening. If you don't know what's happening, this is like a new Afghanistan in the 80s, man, and it's the U.S. blowing it again because history repeats itself, which brings us to this very good George Santayana quote. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. This is news story number 3. We are going to talk about history repeating itself in the Middle East. I don't know if you've seen Charlie Wilson's War. Great movie, fictionalized account of the support of the Mujahideen and what became Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, fighting against the Russians, who were invited by the communist government of Afghanistan to defend the country. They're fighting the Mujahideen, who are religious, and so therefore greatly opposed to communism, also greatly opposed to invaders being in Afghanistan. That's common. British have ran afoul of that. Americans are running afoul of it now. So America, to the tune of billions of dollars, funds these Mujahideen groups, and several years later, 9/11. Then we're back fighting them. ISIS grows up out of, again, a failed occupation and takeover, destruction of a stable, although dictatorial regime in Iraq, and the destabilization of Syria allows for this sort of blowback to grow up. We've been fighting over there. It looks like Assad is going to win. And then things ramp up in a way that doesn't make a lot of sense. So this started back basically 2 weeks ago on the 18th of June. This is the shoot down. Let's just go through on this timeline. This is from the New York Times. U.S. fighter jet shoots down Syrian warplane. An American fighter jet shot down a Syrian warplane on Sunday after it dropped bombs near local ground forces supported by the United States. The first time the American military has downed a Syrian aircraft since the start of the civil war in 2011, officials said. The confrontation represents a further escalation between forces supporting Bashar al-Assad of Syria and the United States, which has been directing the military campaign in Syria and Iraq against the Islamic State. The American F-A-18 shot down the Syrian government warplane south of the town of Tabqa on the same day that Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps launched several mid-range missiles from inside Iran at targets in Syria, hoping to punish Islamic State forces responsible for last week's terrorist attacks in Tehran. So remember this term, local ground forces supported by the United States. So this is the first time that a jet has been shot down. So we have a Syrian jet in Syrian airspace, which is recognized by the international community as Syrian airspace, shot down by an American jet in Syrian airspace. So an invasion. This is a war crime. This is an illegal invasion of a sovereign nation. This is a plain and simple, it's a war crime, according to all international law. But that's out the window. So Russia, of course, has to respond. They're invited. This is Russia. From Activist Post. World on the precipice as Russia threatens to shoot down U.S. jets. The world is now perhaps closer to World War III than it has been in 5 decades as the situation in Syria is heating up yet again. In less than 24 hours, the United States has attacked the Syrian military, Iran has launched missiles into Syria, Russia is threatening to shoot down American planes, and the United States is digging in its heels and threatening to continue to provoke both the Russians and Syrians. While that about sums up the current micro version of the situation, it's important to get a rundown of just what led up to the precipice we're standing on, as heavy fighting took place in West Raqqa between the Syrian military and the SDF, Syria Democratic Forces, a U.S.-backed fighting group that contains elements of jihadists, Kurdish militants, and Kurdish jihadists. The Syrian military conducted a bombing raid near the SDF forces. It is important to note that the SAA claims it was primarily fighting ISIS. So what we've got is a little deeper. So these ground forces are the SDF, supposedly, Syria Democratic Forces, a U.S.-backed fighting group that contains elements of jihadists, Kurdish militants, and Kurdish jihadists. Okay, so we've got the Kurd aspect. Russia threatens to shoot down the planes. This is all ramping up. We've got sanctions. Just to give the timeline here. U.S. Senate votes near unanimously for Russia-Iran sanctions. The U.S. Senate voted nearly unanimously on Thursday for legislation to impose new sanctions on Russia and force President Donald Trump to get Congress's approval before easing any existing sanctions on Russia. In a move that could complicate U.S. President Donald Trump's desire for warmer relations with Moscow, the Senate backed the measure by 98-2. Republican Senator Rand Paul and Bernie Sanders, an independent who caucuses with the Democrats, were the only 2 no votes. So good on those guys. The measure is intended to punish Russia for meddling in the 2016 U.S. election, its annexation of Ukraine's Crimea region, and support for Syria's government in the 6-year-long civil war. If passed in the House of Representatives and signed into law by Trump, it would put into law sanctions previously established by former President Barack Obama's executive orders, including some on Russian energy projects. The legislation also allows new sanctions on Russian mining, metals, shipping and railways, and targets Russians guilty of conducting cyber attacks or supplying weapons to Syria's government. So, Christian, what we have here is, again, preferences over principles. The principle is Syria is a sovereign nation. Russia can sell weapons to Syria. The UN hasn't said Syria can't buy weapons from anybody. Mm-hmm. Here's the U.S. selling weapons. Donald Trump just went and made a huge weapons deal with Syria's neighbors. We're selling weapons to everybody over there, from Israel to Saudi to Jordan. We've got troops in Iraq, Bahrain, Oman, UAE. They're all getting weapons from the U.S. Russia is invited by the Syrian government, which is the legal government. Whether I, as an anarchist, of course, every government is illegitimate. But it's like this. If you're going to play the fucking government game, like if that's the game you're going to play, if you're going to recognize yourself as a legitimate government, you have to recognize other governments by the same rules. If that which makes you legitimate, you have to recognize that as well. Mm-hmm. That's principle. If you invite another country's military to be on your soil, they can be there. Like, for instance, the bases we have in Japan, Germany, Poland, Turkey, on and on and on and on, where the U.S. has bases. Because we've been invited by a country. And we have bases in somewhere we have not been invited, like Cuba, where we have Guantanamo Bay. That's principle. Your preference is you would prefer to have your shit there as opposed to Russia having their shit there. But the principle is Russia's totally legitimate, you're not. So you look like a real asshole when you levy sanctions against somebody for doing something that is exactly what you're doing. Do as I say, not as I do. Right? So, and speaking of, the biggest problem I had with Barack Obama was the drone strikes, for sure. Civilian casualties. Not something that's been talked about with Trump. But we've got aircraft flying around. Let's look at this Trump drone thing. Activist Post. Trump administration set to expand number of civilians killed by drone strikes. Trump to scrap near certainty clause meant to limit civilians killed by drone strikes. The Trump administration reportedly seeks to do away with a clause contained in the presidential policy guidance known as near certainty, as Daniel R. Mahanti, senior advisor for Civic's U.S. program, explains. Quote, in 2013, President Obama, who drastically increased the number of drone strikes during his tenure, delivered a speech in which he outlined the contours of new presidential policy guidance, or PPG, making this principle abundantly clear. Henceforth, the decision to target and kill people outside, quote, areas of active hostilities would require a, quote, near certainty of no civilian casualties, and lethal force would only be used when capture was not feasible. As Mahanti later notes in his article, this guidance itself is fundamentally unsatisfactory to anyone who values human rights, due process, and international rules of engagement, but at least it acknowledged that civilian casualties are deeply unacceptable and must be avoided as a principal tenet of foreign policy. There is evidence to suggest that the new administration has, in practice, already dismissed the near certainty clause, as civilian deaths have increased by orders of magnitude since Trump took office. And then here are the numbers. Let's take a look at these. It's Trump. This is casualties. So this is these are the air wars totals. So these are since Trump took office. Coalition strikes 22,000, 13,000 strikes in Iraq. Wow, this is a lot. 9,000 strikes in Syria. 1,000 days of campaign. Okay, so no, this is over the last 3 years. Minimum civilians estimated killed by coalition, 4,000. 84,000 bombs and missiles dropped. So Trump is picking this up. I mean, 4,000 civilians, that's creating more quote-unquote terrorists. But let's talk about what our airstrikes are doing in the north of Syria. So, Christian, this is just to lay this out a little bit, what the area that we're talking about. This is in the north of Syria. This is on the border of Turkey. This is an area where the ethnic Kurds have a heavy presence. Mm-hmm. So you've got sort of Iraq and Syria coming together, and then up in the corner is Kurdistan. Mm-hmm. And the Kurds, the ethnic Kurds, have a very heavy presence in that northern area. Now you have to remember, the Turkish people and the Kurds are kind of like the Israelis and the Palestinians. They have a long-standing ethnic feud. They've done a lot against each other. They're basically mortal enemies. Right. Culturally, they are mortal enemies. So the Kurds have been helping the U.S., and the Kurds have been a pretty stable force. The U.S. has helped in Iraq the Kurds to have their autonomous region of Kurdistan. They've been very well protected. They are producing oil. They're getting their country of Kurdistan up and running, which the Turks are not happy about, the Arabs are not happy about. This has been a relatively oppressed group of people, mm-hmm. By both the Arabs and the Turks. And the U.S., since we've been in Iraq, it's been a bit of a buffer zone. So this area, what's happening in this area, what first brought this to my mind was actually the actions of a fellow crypto savage, as crypto savage as they come. A guy by the name of Amir Taki. This is somebody that I think people should go and look up. Look up his story. Definitely read this article in Wired that's from back in March. I'm just going to read a little bit of it, and it will start to give people a background of the story that's not being told, these local ground forces and what's going on. We're going to dig in right now for the next 20 minutes or so and really do at least a medium dive on this, a dive nonetheless. Let's look at this Amir Taki. This is from Wired magazine in March. How anarchist Bitcoin coder Amir Taki wound up fighting ISIS. According to reports in the BBC and Wired, Taki traveled to Syria in February 2015 to join the Rojava movement. Quote, when I found out there was an actual anarchist revolution happening in Syria, I felt I have to go do that. I was compelled to go help them, he told Wired. Taki was previously famous for his radical political ideology and his work on Dark Wallet, Bitcoin wallet software that makes transactions using the digital currency private and untraceable. Once in Syria, despite going out with the intention of offering technical support, Taki found himself forced to fight instead. I got sent to the front line. I had no training. I was given a Kalashnikov. I learned how to use a gun on the way. Another Western fighter showed me, he said to the BBC. I wanted to go elsewhere where my skills would be useful. He says he subsequently provided software training, designed a curriculum, and helped build factories. My main goal with going to Rojava was not because I opposed ISIS. It's because I support the Kurds' revolution. I support their politics and their struggle, he said. Quote, it is the only solution for lasting peace in the Middle East. Okay, Christian, so Rojava. There's no mention of this Rojava.
Yeah.
What is Rojava? They're building factories. They're fielding armies. They've got weapons. What is Rojava? Well, turns out Rojava is the area of northern Syria that we're talking about, where Raqqa, which is the base for ISIS, is. But it's a swath that's all of northern Syria connecting the sea to Kurdistan. All right, so let's take just a look at Rojava here. Just pop this Rojava up. This is from Wikipedia on the Rojava movement. The Rojava conflict, also known as the Rojava Revolution, is a political upheaval, social revolution, and military conflict taking place in northern Syria known as Rojava. During the Syrian civil war, a coalition of Arab, Kurdish, Syriac, and some Turkmen groups have sought to establish the constitution of Rojava inside the de facto autonomous region, while military wings and allied militias have fought to maintain control of the region. The revolution has been characterized by the prominent role played by women, both on the battlefield and within the newly formed political system, as well as the implementation of democratic confederalism, a form of grassroots democracy based on local assemblies. So, let's just take a little look at this. We've got the Rojava conflict. This is the location. They have these different governorates, these different states. So what are we talking about? Where are they fighting? Where are they holding territory? Al-Hazakah governorate, Raqqa governorate. So that's where the bombing, that's where the plane was attacked, because it was bombing. The Syrian plane was bombing these forces that were attacking ISIS. So you have this three-way war of the Syrian government, who wants northern Syria, ISIS, the Mujahideen, who want northern Syria, and then this Rojava group made up mainly of Kurds that want that section. Also Aleppo governorate, so they're claiming Aleppo as well. Then they have these different cantons. What are their goals? Democratic confederalism, direct democracy, eco-socialism, social ecology, and feminism. These are all left-wing codes for socialism, really for communism. So this is the status. The PYD, we'll talk about who the PYD are, controls parts of northeast and northwest Syria. And Rojava leadership has declared an independent federation. They've declared an independent nation in this area. You're not hearing this in the US media. You're not hearing that there is a revolution happening in this area that is anti-ISIS and anti-Syrian.
Wow.
They're trying to take this land. So let's look at a little bit about who's involved with this, who the parties are involved, because it's a coalition of parties, as with any revolution, especially the communist revolution. And it should be very, very interesting to people who have studied anything about communist revolutions, whether it's the Bolsheviks, whether it's Mao. The propagandistic use of female fighters is a normal staple of radical left-wing revolutions.
Wow.
It's a normal staple. Now, Amir Taki he said an anarchist revolution, anarcho-communism is what he's talking about. Most people don't know this, but anarchists were a huge chunk of those people who were fighting on the side of the Bolsheviks in the Russian Revolution, in the Red Army. After the Bolsheviks took power, they killed or imprisoned all the anarchists.
Oh, shit.
It's supposed to be an anarchist revolution until people get into power. Then it all changes around. So let's take a look at the parties involved in this. Who are the parties? The PYD, they said, takes has control of most of it. So this is the TEMDEV is the constituent, is the group that's all together. It says, the TEMDEV has been the most successful organ in Rojava because it has the determination and power to change things. It includes many people who believe in working voluntarily at all levels of service to make the event experiment successful. And it has set up an army of defense consisting of 3 different parts: the YPG, the YPJ, and the Asayish, a mixed force of men and women that exists in the towns and all the checkpoints outside the towns to protect civilians from any external threat, and a special unit for women only to deal with issues of rape and domestic violence. So you've actually have an armed feminist wing, a radical feminist armed wing, which is new, but something people should be paying attention to. So here are the parties. The Democratic Union Party, which clear socialist. Syriac Union Party, clear socialist. Syrian Kurds Democratic Peace Party, Kurdistan Liberal Union Party, the Libertarian Communist Party of Kurdistan. I don't know how you have libertarian communism, but that's the name of the party, and the Kurdistan Patriotic Assembly. So clearly, if a coalition allows the Libertarian Communist Party of Kurdistan, you clearly know where their politics are. So let's look at these forces. These are the forces on the ground. The YPG, the People's Protection Units, the YPJ, the Women's Protection Units, and this Asayish, which is like the police. So, you see, active from 2004 to present with the People's Protection Units, 2013 to present with the Women's Protection Units, and the Asayish 2012 to present. Allegiance is to Rojava and the Democratic Union Party, that main party. So the People's Protection Units, light infantry militia, 50,000 strong. You've got the women's units, light infantry, 24,000 strong. And then you've got the police units in all the different cantons, 15,000 strong. These are armed militia, armed police. Nobody's talking about this. These are established parties, and what do you see? The red communist star. The red communist star. So let's take a look at just as an idea, because they're like, oh, it's going to be anarchist. It's going to be all voluntary. People are going to, history repeating itself. Let's take a look at this comparison just to give an idea of what we're talking about. So this region has about the same population as Los Angeles, about 4 million people. Half of them are internal refugees from other areas in Syria that presumably might leave after the conflict is over. Same, LA in this area, about 4 million people. LA has 10,000 uniformed police officers, and we know how rough the LAPD is. We know how on top of the population the LAPD is known for being, with 10,000 uniformed police officers. And those are officers with shotguns and, they've got some pistols. The PYD, the Democratic Union Party, the party that's in control of these groups, has 75,000 light infantry militia armed with Kalashnikovs, troop carriers, rocket-propelled grenades, and 15,000 police and security forces. All of these people being paid,
wow,
uniformed. 90,000. You imagine if you took the LAPD, multiplied the number of cops on the street by 9, gave them all assault rifles, camos, body armor, technical trucks, 50 calibers, troop carriers, helicopters, small tanks. Yeah, you think you're going to get democracy when you've got one party that presumably has 1 or 2 people at the top of it who can control 90,000 armed communist individuals? You really think you're going to get democracy? We've seen this before. Mm-hmm. We've seen this before. Time and time and time again. From Russia to China to Vietnam to Laos to Cambodia to fucking Cuba to now to Venezuela. Every single time they march and have a revolution under that goddamn star.
Yep.
It's the same fucking thing. And the U.S. went and created these mujahideen to fight people fighting under the banner of that goddamn star. And now we're arming the people fighting under the star to fight the mujahideen that we created.
Jesus. That's crazy.
And it's funny to me. It just shows that, like, the names and faces change, but the story stays the same. That it's like, back in the day, it was about the workers. Remember? See, but that bullshit doesn't work anymore for people, especially not Americans to follow it. So the American sympathies now, because Americans have fallen into identity politics, they're like, no, we'll just hit the feminist angle. We'll hit the feminist angle. So, like, show this propaganda. We stand in solidarity with the freedom fighters of Rojava, the cute girl with her Kalashnikov on her shoulder under the anarcho-communist flag, the black and red.
Wow.
She's an Antifa.
Yeah,
if she was in New York, she'd be wearing the same outfit and just a black mask, and she's an Antifa. You've got the U.S. supporting an Antifa revolution. And best believe they're calling Bashar Assad a fascist. And they're saying that they're anti-fascist. Best believe.
Yep.
Those that do not remember history, they are doomed to repeat it. So take a look at this. And now I'm going to take you back 100 years. The names and faces change. Hit this Bolshevik propaganda. Boom. Go back. Go forward. The names and faces change, bro. This was for, it actually says, and it's got freedom again in it. Freedom loans is actually what it is. These were war loans. People giving up their money to help the fight in World War I, right after the Tsarist government had fallen apart. They were in a transitional government, and this was how the Bolsheviks came to power.
Wow.
History repeats itself. History repeats itself, bro.
It's crazy.
But this is what's not being talked about.
Yeah.
It's not just local ground forces. They've got a whole country. They're fighting a revolution. They've got a whole constitution. They've got a government. They're organized. Clearly they're organized. And they want that section. And the thing is, no, it's not theirs. And Turkey is a NATO ally, but Turkey is not going to allow these Kurds to be there. And this week, we'll probably get to cover it next week because it's starting to blow up. It started to blow up today. Turkey is talking about they're going to send now troops in to stop this Rojava movement. Because Turkey is worried about terrorist attacks against Turkey being launched from inside that area. They could actually deal with Assad a lot better. Assad never attacked Turkey, but the Kurds have. And so here is the U.S. in the middle of this thing. Preferences over principle, man. Just creating another enemy.
Yep.
Creating another enemy that look, we're worried about the radicalization of Muslims, right? This is this big concern. And I'm going to say this now because this is Vinstradamus. This is total Vinstradamus. We're worried about young Muslim men in the West going to the Middle East, getting radicalized, coming back, and doing attacks. Okay. But if you go back to the 70s, the people who were doing the terrorist attacks, like the Weathermen, the SLA, they were socialist. They were doing terrorist attacks. You're creating a haven. We see with Amir Taki. Amir Taki goes over there. He's an anarcho-communist. He's an Antifa guy. He goes over there, and he gets to fight with them. He's living with them. Talk about getting radicalized.
Yeah.
You don't think that a bunch of these Antifa from all over the place who already have a screw loose, when there's this place to go to, that this isn't their first vacation destination,
exactly.
bro? The weather's nice. They're up in the mountains. They're going to go help the people, the poor people of Rojava. They're going to pick up a weapon. And you don't think that they're going to come back and smash patriarchy?
Wow.
It's history just fucking repeating itself. Because you're not learning. They're not learning these lessons, man.
Nope.
Preferences over principle. That's the problem. When you do principle, you're just like, yo, the principle was fucked up the first time, it's fucked up this time. We stay out of the country. Let them deal with it. Let them deal with it inside their own fucking country. Not our job.
Wow.
Not our job. So, wow, perfect 1 hour. Let's roll to break, man, and then we will come back with we'll do a little counter markets, and then we'll come back with our guest, Lori Harfenist.
Awesome.
Welcome back to the Vin Armani Show. We are streaming live on YouTube at youtube.com/Vin Armani, also on Twitter and Periscope. At Vin Armani is my handle there. And we are streaming live on the Facebook page of our content partner, Activist Post. That's facebook.com/Activist Post. Before we get to our interview, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about counter markets. So we are approaching the release of our June issue, and I've heard from our editor, Jeff Paul, that it is absolute fire. My article this coming month in June, is, I think, actually a very important one. I went over the new Bitcoin and cryptocurrency laws in New Hampshire and in Nevada, gave a breakdown, lots of links. Also talking about the money service business laws as it relates to federal. So I wanted to, in this, give a lot of value, say all of the things that you needed to do to either, one, register with the government if you decided that you wanted to go white market on all things cryptocurrency, or two, stay within the limits that keep you safe if you decided that you wanted to stay in the gray market, which is where I think cryptocurrencies really belong. So this is your last chance to get the May issue. You go to countermarkets.com, you get that 100% free, and then we are sure that you are going to want the June issue. So if you subscribe, you will actually get all of our back issues as well as the newest issue. So like, now's the perfect time. Go countermarkets.com, sign up, get your first issue for free. That'll be the May issue. Then especially if you use cryptocurrency, massive discount. You'll get your subscription, you'll get the June issue straight away, and then you'll have access to all of the archives as well. So go check it out. Countermarkets.com, trends and strategies for maximum freedom. And so with that, I would like to get to our guest, Lori Harfenist. Lori Harfinest is an author, journalist, political commentator, and self-described punk. She is the creator and host of The Resident, a long-running project currently distributed by RT America, featuring Lori's unique take on current events. Lori Harfinest, welcome to the Vin Armani Show. Well, welcome back to the Vin Armani Show.
Thanks for having me again. Fun to be here.
Well, people obviously know you for your take on current events. But those who follow you on social media, so the people who follow you on RT may not know that you are also like a huge space buff, right? We talked about you being a science fiction buff, and I think maybe the two of them go hand in hand. But you are incredibly up to date on all things space related. So that's what I wanted to have you on to talk about.
Awesome, let's do it. I'm incredibly up to date on everything.
Well, okay, fair enough. Yes,
what most interests me is space.
So, to show people just how much you are interested by space, I wanted to just show this little video because this really makes me smile all the time. So show the SpaceX thing.
11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
There it goes.
Oh my God, it's going!
So this was February.
Yeah, this was February.
So talk to us about the experience of. Not many people have gone to. You're really dedicated if you go and watch a rocket launch. So talk to us about how that whole thing happens.
Sure. Well, I saw, I've always wanted to go, and I was, one day I was just like, let's take a look and see how hard it could be. And I saw that NASA has this program called NASA Social, that you can apply to see different things that NASA does at all different locations that they have. And so they threw it up there that you could go watch a SpaceX launch, a resupply to the space station launch. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'll apply. And then you just have to go through like a million steps and give them all your information. And they said, sure, come on down. So I went through NASA, and I got a nice little tour of the Kennedy Space Center, which was amazing, and got to see the vehicle assembly building and all the science and the plants that are on the space station right now. And then the whole thing culminated with the launch, which was basically a resupply of the astronauts' stuff that they need up there, but then also a lot of scientific experiments. So it was really exciting, but it was pretty intense because it got pushed back twice, and there was a lot of other stuff going on in the world in February that was pretty crazy. So when I finally got to see the launch, it was like it was great. It was awesome to see, and it just makes you want to say to the all the conspiracy theorists out there who think NASA is not real or space is a farce, like you can just go see a rocket, and you don't even have to go through NASA. You can just go to the beach down there in Florida and watch the rockets go up into space, and it confirms that it's real. So it was a very real moment for me, and anyone can apply.
So let's talk about the conspiracy theorists the theories a little bit, right? So I want to do two of them. Maybe we'll start with the most recent, which is this Alex Jones. They're sending child slaves to Mars. Can we talk about a little bit about actually how far along the technology is for Mars sending humans, and why this is a completely on its face just ridiculous thing?
Well, I mean, it's just on its face a ridiculous thing. For many reasons. But yeah, we don't have everything worked out yet in terms of actually landing on the planet without the astronauts having to tumble way too much, and so we're working on that, the reverse thrusting and all that, and we're getting closer every day, but it's not happening, and it just does nothing but perpetuate the crazy theories out there, when but there's that kind of crap that is out there. But then the good news is that there's the internet out there, and you can see the actual news and the actual science that's going on, and a curious mind can see for themselves. So or then Alex Jones.
Right. It's really that one. I mean, we won't even discuss the flat Earth one, because that's insane. I mean, I think it says a lot about people that we can. Even in this day and age, that on the exact same device where you can see rockets taking off, you can see people from NASA talking about all the things that they're doing, literally on the same.
You can do more than see it. You can experience it yourself. Like, you can get on a plane and go up into the air and land across the planet. There's proof that it's round.
It is pretty insane that, but it also seems like it's such a waste, because there's so much interesting stuff going on. So
Well, yeah, that's it. It's a waste. I don't even spend any time looking at the stuff that's a waste, because it's just a waste. We're getting mad at it. Everyone gets mad at all the I can't believe they said this, or who has time when there's so much interesting real information that we have access to now.
So let's talk about real information. Let's talk about why SpaceX in particular, because I know that you're a big SpaceX fan. Why SpaceX? It doesn't get talked about enough. Why it's important? Why reusable rockets are important? What this potentially means? Why you're so fired up about it? Can we just talk about what the value proposition that SpaceX is bringing to this whole thing?
Yeah, so a reusable rocket drastically cuts down the price of sending crap into space. If you just have to blow up a rocket and it costs, $300 million to launch it up there, then it's gone. What Elon Musk SpaceX is doing right now is using a lot of reusable rockets, or they've done it successfully several times now, and they just keep churning out the launches. Like every couple of weeks now, they've been holding up this pace, and they're doing it from different launch pads all over the world. And he's proving that he means business, where, a lot of it sounded just like talk, but he's actually moving commercial space industry along faster because he's making it more affordable. So he's able to bring more science up to the space station, that are sponsored by different corporations or different governments or whatever. But it's we're learning so much more, and we're able to do so much more in space if we can afford it. So that's a big deal, and no one talks about it, and it's like great news, but they'd rather talk about the stupid crap that's going on.
And of course, and we've talked about on the show, I read his biography, and he is very much about his whole life. He's wanted to go to Mars. That's his whole thing. Would you go to Mars yourself?
Yeah, definitely.
You would do it?
Yes, definitely. I wouldn't want to go on the first mission,
right?
Ideally,
well, yeah, clearly, yeah.
And I think I'd rather go to the moon. Because
why? Why?
Well, a moon colony would be great for like a launching pad into other things space, but it has a better view. You can see Earth just spinning right there, and you're only a couple days away, whereas Mars you're months away at best, years away, more likely, depending on where you are in the cycle. But it's closer and it's got a better view. I would rather do the moon.
Now, why do you think we haven't been back to the moon? What's your opinion on that?
Well, basically, I think most of it has been commercial. There's two things. It's like within the public consciousness, is this something that we feel the need to be pioneers again and to seek answers further out from ourselves. So there's that, and there's more of that right now. And then there's also just the technology. It used to just be in NASA's hands, and it kind of just like fell off the table, basically, as it wasn't prioritized, just from a government standpoint. It just costs a lot of money, and they weren't able to find the commercial applications for it, but to make it economically viable. But that's all changing now, so that's why the government is now starting to get involved with
let's talk about this. So Donald Trump signed something, and then the House did something as well. So you're plus on Donald Trump with the Space Advisory Council?
National Space Council.
Okay, so what is this National Space Council?
So basically, it's a prioritization of space, basically, within the government. It used to exist like early 90s, and then it existed while the original space program was going on in like the 60s and 70s. And then it just went away. But basically, it just means that the president, the vice president, the secretaries of defense and commerce and state, and like a whole bunch of them promise to get together and keep making space a priority and keep talking about the implications for from a commercial perspective, from a defense perspective, from all these different angles. So it's basically just like a commitment to reprioritize checking out space at a high level. And then Congress just basically, so they decided they will just split the Air Force. Anything that the Air Force does with space, they would decide to make a new agency, the U.S. Space Corps, which is, so it's like the defense arm that's interested in space. So they essentially made a new defense agency, which is really interesting, that's just solely dedicated to space. And it's been something that our government has talked about over the years. They've done lots of different studies. The Accountability Office, came out with many reports that said this all makes sense and we need to do it, and that was decades ago, and nothing's ever been done. And so they just did it now. And they did it kind of like no one cared. No one paid any attention, which was pretty amazing, because this is like the creation of a new defense arm, which is amazing, and it's dedicated to space, and you'd think people would care, but no.
So, I mean, it's as someone who loves space, I love seeing us involved in wanting to get off this planet. I think it's probably our birthright to do, and it's awesome to see it in this generation. I'd love to get your thoughts, though, on clearly we're talking about potentially the weaponization of space, right? And this has been an ongoing thing since back with Reagan and the Star Wars program and whatnot. I mean, I guess I do have a concern about them throwing weapon. We already have spy satellites, so I guess I have a concern about lasers beaming down on me, or them launching missiles from satellites or something like that. Are you concerned about any of that?
Not any more than I'm concerned about Yellowstone blowing its top.
Right. Okay.
Like it's like all of these things can happen, but the fact of the matter is most of amazing innovation that humanity has accomplished has come out of the government or defense under, that's what propels the money behind it, like fear or whatever. Of course, I don't want more weapons. Weapons are terrible. I don't like any weapons at all. But it's just the way that humanity works. Like, I can't see it as a good or bad thing. All I see is that we are clearly progressing towards space right now. And the government getting involved and the commercialization of it, like two things that are kind of gross, are unfortunately necessary to help us get off the planet. Like, it'd be wonderful if we just did it in this very, kumbaya kind of way, but that's just not the way it works, especially, with everything being very expensive and dangerous and all that.
So let's talk about danger then. Asteroids, right? This is one that is definitely, it bugs me. It seems like every year now. Well, every year they're getting better at predicting these asteroids, and it seems like there's more and more asteroids that they're like, oh yeah, it's going to come like inside the moon's orbit. There's all these asteroids. I know that they've been talking about possibly like landing on an asteroid and blowing it up and trying some things out. What are your thoughts about traveling out to the asteroid belt? Are you worried about asteroids? I mean, and you're looking at this space thing. Is that a concern for you, or is it just
Asteroids a concern for me? Not really.
No.
They're not really.
You're not really concerned about it.
No. I mean, I think that we're making steps in the right direction. We keep finding new ways that we might be able to track them and blow them up, and we're doing all that we can, but I mean, the odds are tremendous that it would happen, but it totally could. But again, Yellowstone is way overdue to pop its lid, and that's an extinction level event, so pick the thing you want to worry about, basically. I'm not too worried about it. I think we just got to keep doing the right things that we're doing, and keep on looking for them, and do our best to avoid them, but it doesn't keep me up at night.
I do want to dig a little deeper into because it's something that we talk about a lot here, into the sort of advances that we've seen now that we've had private industry involved in space heavy, right? And the competition there's been more innovation in the last 5 years than there was like in the preceding 30 years. And, now we've got government deciding, okay, we want to take a look at this. If space travel was to be made more expensive by government, either deciding that they were going to tax it, or deciding that that if Elon Musk wanted to keep using the NASA setup, where do you fall on people making a decision that like maybe space is not something government should be involved in? Like, do you think that it's important to have a public-private partnership? Do you think that if that was the case, that Elon Musk should just step away from government and say we'll do this on our own? What are your thoughts?
I just think it's the way that it's going to work right now. It's a technology that has been in the hands of few that's now in the hands of many, and it should all kind of work together to see how we move forward. I think there's a lot of, if it's all commercialization, who's going to have fewer morals in space, corporations or that can, start mining the moon to like way too far, and they hit something they shouldn't have, or, a bureaucratic government that also likes to do a lot of fear campaigning around it. It's hard to say which one I think is like the one that should bring us to space. I think it's just they're both the fact that they're both interested right now, and there is this tension, and there is money starting to be on the table that can actually be made from this. I just see that like it's going to be a partnership. Whether it's right or wrong, I'm just glad that it's happening.
So your book, I Human, and something that you've focused on is automation, is robots. We see with SpaceX and with Jeff Bezos's Blue Origin, right? With that project as well, that they're heavy on the automation, both from the rockets, the barges that it's landing on. Everything's automated. We've sent
Right.
the rovers, many rovers to Mars, and the obviously the robot satellites that are flying around the solar system and now leaving, some of them. Do you think or how do you feel about this move to automation? Whereas before, like the history of spaceflight, and it still is very new. We're still just learning, but the history, in the 60s and the 70s was all about these sort of heroic individuals, right? Even into the 80s was about these heroic humans. And now there's perhaps not a space for humans. What is your thought about that? I mean, should humans be pushing further to want to go? I think there are some people who want to go, or is this really a place for more robots?
Well, I think it's the missions of actually are going to decide that, but I think ultimately we want to get more humans into space. I mean,
why do you think so?
Well, because it's in our DNA, like we're pioneering, and we're like a virus. We want to spread, and like all right, we're all over this planet, and now we're definitely global and all LinkedIn, and you can watch people from around the globe instantaneously. So it's clearly the next frontier, and I think that kind of spirit will wake up again once there's the missions in place. We haven't decided how we're going to get to Mars yet, if it's going to be a stepping stone with the moon or whatever. But the pressure that the commercial space industry is putting on NASA right now is going to start breeding that. But hey, listen, there are people circling the Earth right now on the space station, and that's really fun to watch. And they do all these amazing things. And you can watch them like shoot over the sky. You can see them. NASA will send you text to let you know it's shooting over you, and you can look up, and there it goes. So there's stuff going on right now. Unfortunately, our media is focusing on other things. But I see room for that in the near future for sure. It's especially now that the industry is growing, and it's just going to keep growing. And then I think we'll start seeing that that stardom that we used to ascribe to our space people will start to reawaken.
What do you think fell off? What do you think changed in the culture? Because it was so big, and there were certainly global conflicts happening. There were serious things going on. What was it that changed in the culture, you think, that made space sort of fall off the radar?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of different, ways to look at it, and a lot of different theories. Honestly, I feel like it was just mostly just an economic thing, It's just okay, now we're going to space. Now what? Like we don't have the commercial application yet, and we're not quite sure, and it's very expensive to do, and I think it just became as simple as that.
So
and there's that's why everything's we do everything in low Earth orbit right now, because we can do that, and you can make money. You can shoot satellites up there so that we all have Wi-Fi, or that help our GPS work, or all the crap, the thousands of satellites that we have up there. There's commercial applications for, and so we've spent a lot of money doing that, but we haven't really nailed the commercial application for the moon or Mars, So I think that just kind of pushed it to the side.
I want to talk about this. I want to talk about the Wi-Fi for a minute, because I know that we have a lot of conspiracy theorists, and we were talking about SpaceX and the Facebook satellite that blew up on the. I'm sure that you saw this. That blew up on the launch pad, and the little thing that zoomed in. You have any thoughts on that?
I didn't actually read up on that one, so I don't really know exactly what happened.
Yeah, I wish I had the video. There's a little. So it exploded. There's right before it explodes, you see this little. It looks like a UFO. You're gonna have to see this. It zooms into the frame, and then it just sits there, and then the thing starts to blow up, and then it takes off.
And this was in space?
No, this was on the launch pad. where the,
On the
when
launch
the
pad.
yeah the Facebook satellite, when SpaceX was, when the rocket blew up with Mark Zuckerberg's satellite on it. That's
Oh, I
which
gotta watch it. I mean, I just like I probably laughed when I just looked away because I mean, I'm sure it looks like that.
a lot of conspiracy theories around that one. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
but that is a plan that I think a lot of, and maybe that's a jumping off point for some people to really be excited. This idea of providing Wi-Fi to the whole world through satellites, and these things actually getting up there. Are there any other projects that you have, or missions that you have found interesting, that are things that people don't know about, that are either in the works or that are already up there?
Yeah, well, I mean, what the space station does with science is tremendous. So they have, it's this thing that, the people from different countries around the world live on, these astronauts, and they conduct just tons and tons of scientific experiments. The launch that I watched from the Kennedy Space Center was actually the MRSA virus that's being
Oh,
shot
my
up.
goodness.
This is good for the conspiracy
Right.
theory, actually. Like, oh my God, that's amazing. I'm going to go watch MRSA be shot up into space. But the reason why they're testing it up there is because microgravity presents a really amazing scientific opportunity. So in the space station, in space, you don't have gravity, you don't have an atmosphere, you don't have all of these forces that push against an organism or anything that wants to grow. So they shoot up a lot of different bugs and a lot of different proteins and crystals and different things to see how they're going to grow in microgravity, because you can see how they're going to go faster than they're going to go here on Earth, where they are subjected to the atmosphere and gravity and all these different forces. So they shoot the MRSA virus up there, and it can grow, and then we can study how they've grown and therefore predict what they're going to want to grow and build better medicines ahead of time before they get there.
Oh, interesting.
That's how that works. Yeah. And they do that all the time with different medicines and plants and better ways to feed people. And they've got all this different food. So they have all these great experiments going on inside, and then outside the thing, they keep strapping on more and more stuff that are like, that just track lightning, all the lightning in the world, and track the weather and track the ozone and how that's repairing itself. And so they have all this interesting stuff going on up there. That's just like, we're learning so much scientifically from so much in space. And again, nobody knows it.
Well, it's funny that nowadays, I mean, people could not survive without GPS, right? It's just would not happen. I mean, Uber would be dead in the water, right? It's these things that we take for granted that we use every single day. I wonder how many people actually even know that GPS is coming off of satellites.
Right.
I wonder how many people actually even know that.
Right, exactly. They don't know how it works or anything. But the truth of the matter is that, like, and there's this whole, like, politically, people are all up in arms, globalism versus nationalism. And it's like this, and everyone's going mad. But the reason why they're doing that is because we've literally just gone global, right? We've literally just plugged in and connected to each other. And so that's what we're doing. You can fight about, like, whatever you want to fight about. It's, to me, it's the side effect of us going global. And we've just gone global, and humanity now has access to all of this information, throughout our entire history. And we're speeding faster and faster, in a direction of, like, knowing a lot more. That, to me, it's just like, it's pretty amazing. Like, science is, like, better than ever right now. We're doing better scientifically than ever, and people are, like, acting like we're also, like, going backward, which we're not. That's just all rhetoric.
That's a really interesting point. It does seem that embracing space is embracing the reality that we are really a single species again, in a way that we haven't been since we were some single tribe on the savannah back at the very, very beginning of time, right? Like, we're coming back to that. It's a scary place to be. So, I mean, I guess that jumps off. I'd love to get your thoughts and your opinions on this rising nationalism as well, and maybe what psychologically needs to occur, or what will occur, or what could occur to get people to embrace it. Do you think that this is really just a reaction to the world changing in a way that people don't understand, or do you think that there is really some basis for this whole like nationalist thing that's happening?
Well, yeah, of course, there's arguments, to preserve different points of view and ways to think, and the threat of globalism is also this force where you have to think a certain way and subscribe to a certain 10 things, and these are the movies that we're going to watch, and these are the words that we're going to use. And so people that that kind of like scary brainwashing one of us thing kind of happens with globalism, and then with nationalism you get it's all about racism and division and hatred and war, and like it's like these are ways to look at them negatively, but they also both present like positive things. Like, yes, we're moving forward, and yes, we should be questioning it because we don't want to lose what makes us great individually and what we have to bring to the table individually, because that's where a lot of creativity gets sparked, when we're allowed to be individuals and say the words that we want and that kind of thing. So, I just feel like everyone just wants to say things are good or bad, and then they're going to stick with that judgment, and okay, abortion, go, good, bad, no one's like sitting there and talking about like, my God, think of what we're talking about. This is crazy, just from top to bottom,
right,
to start with.
right.
This is the society we live in, like, but they just want to say good or bad quickly to everything. And like, I don't know. Everything is both good and bad, generally.
I mean, I
stop having like the good and bad argument. You start to have the real argument, the real conversation, where change can really happen.
Do you see that happening? I mean, we have the most capability to have these conversations, more than we ever have, and yet I feel like it's hard for me to assess whether it is on net balance, whether
right.
whether people in general are more having a conversation, or whether it's this monologue of just just bouncing. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think on social media, clearly it thrives on hive minds and the hysteria, and it's not a real conversation anyway. Like, this is a pretty real conversation, but it's still different than like a face-to-face conversation when you're hanging out and like going to a restaurant or like whatever, So there's like conversations in the digital space and conversations in the analog space. And I feel like the real conversations, I think those are moving along. It's only been like a few months since the election, since everyone, had this complete shock that the world has changed. And I'm already starting to see the conversations changing a little bit here in New York, which I think says a lot, because New Yorkers tend to think, kind of be like-minded. And I'm starting to see, people opening their eyes to more things when I talk to them in the real world. Online, whatever. You can seek out what you want online. There's social media is, to me, an oxymoron, like there's nothing social about media because you're interacting alone with your computer, so it's like, it's all kind of weird when you talk about conversation online,
How are your in-person? You said that you're noticing that there's a little bit of a tenor change in your in-person conversations. So can you give us an example of like something that you've noticed that stuck out to you, where you're like, oh, that's a change?
Yeah, this is really funny. I was at a ramen place in Brooklyn, and if you don't know, ramen is very cool to eat. I know, if all of your viewers know this, but ramen is so hot, but it's also delicious. I was
delicious,
ramen, right? And, like, usually I just want to get in, eat the ramen, get out, and like everyone annoys me, at the other tables or whatever. But we were there. My husband and I were there the other day, and there were a bunch of dudes sitting at a table next to us, and they were talking about how they didn't want anyone to call them liberal anymore, because liberal now means a different thing, and it's almost like a dirty word. And I thought that was really interesting. I was like, wow, I can't believe that I'm hearing these guys say this, because I mean, of course I had written them off as, liberal.
Right.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but like, like they just looked like the typical New Yorker that was
Right.
gonna, and they were having this conversation about they didn't want to be called liberals anymore. I thought that was great. That was definitely a change.
Did they have a word that had they decided on a word, or they were just like, no,
They
I
want
just
to be called?
Yeah.
No, it's just not liberal. Don't, which is good. No, you shouldn't want to be called liberal. You shouldn't want to be called conservative. You
shouldn't want to be
wanna
called anything. Yeah.
Yeah, no label. Start there.
Yeah, that is. I think that's a very, very important and good starting point. Is there anything else that has been that has stood out to you that feels like a change? I know the last time that we talked, it was like in the full throes of weirdness. Is there anything that stuck out to you, or that you've been interested in, that has seemed like a change and that has seemed hopeful? Because I think that there's a lot less hope. There's not enough hope. You know what I
Right.
mean? There's not enough hopefulness.
Right.
Is there anything that stood out to you that you found has been hopeful, that's been a change recently?
Well, I mean, all the change to me is hopeful. Like, I'm extremely hopeful at this time because things are starting to change, and a lot of people are like looking at our foreign policy for the first time and realizing like the state of the world and where we're at. And to me, it's scary. And the reason, especially, there's a lot of money and power on the table right now, and people are fighting over that. And so, of course, they're gonna try to instill the fear because they don't want to lose their power and their money. So they're gonna say terrible things, and it's so scary. And like, but that's just like that's the game going on because times are changing. But to me, like, I'm excited. I think it's fantastic that things are changing. I think it's fantastic that we're interested in space again. I think it's amazing that the world can now go online and read things for themselves and get past the 10 things that they're supposed to know and learn things for themselves. Like, to me, I think it's a very hopeful time. People are marching for women in science. Like, this is great. These are things we should uphold. Great, like everyone's ratings are up. Everything's great.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
I'm having a good time. I'm having a good time right now. That's for sure. It's also summer and 4th of July weekend. So.
Right. that has been fun here so far, even though it's been incredibly hot. So no, I you know what, I agree with you on all of that. I think that there is a lot of hope, even though there's a lot of hope and a lot of change. Really, God.
I mean, I voted for hope and change. I voted for hope and change.
I did the first time. I did the first time.
Hey, here's what change.
It took long
All right,
enough.
I'm hopeful.
That's awesome. On that note, Lori Harfenist, I would advise everybody check her out, the resident on RT America. Thank you for being on. Thank you for talking about space, and we'll have to have you back on for another conversation.
Anytime. Thanks for
All right,
having
Lori.
me.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
See you later. So, Christian.
She's great.
She's great. We don't. It is an interesting. It's something that I think about a lot. How connected we are.
Right.
And we've tried. I think our spirits, are inner. There's something inside of us that is. At one point, I mean, there was just one family of humans. I mean, that's a given truth. And I think we've tried to get back to that, and we're in a situation where I do see a lot of division. People want to divide on these weird lines where, if we are really looking at what's going on in terms of science and technology, these are things that benefit us all. Like, we're dividing up on the globalists and nationalism and. It's even one reason why, for me, it's difficult with even feuds going on within like the anarchist community and whatnot. I'm just like, guys, the whole point here is that, yes, there are a lot of different things, a lot of different preferences that people have. If they're nonviolent, everybody should just be able to have them. Mm-hmm. Just go ahead. Do what you want to do. Be interested in what you want to do. If it's good for humanity, the market will reward you. If it's bad for humanity, the market will punish you, and then go do something else. Find your place.
Yeah.
Go out there. And it's no reason to pick up arms and decide, I'm going to, this little area is going to be all this, and we're going to have this political philosophy, and we're going to push this. It's coming from every side. It's coming from the right. It's coming from the left. Mm-hmm. But again, I think that's the old culture, right?
Right.
I think that really what voluntarism, crypto savagery, what all this technology, whether it's at space, automation, the blockchain, the internet in general, that's about to be like Internet 3 or 4.0,
Yeah.
you know, that's coming. All of these new advances, everybody's going to use them. You know, if we were focused on making those better, those are all like the U.S. thinks the U.S. government thinks the internet's great. ISIS thinks the government's the internet's great. Russia thinks the internet's great. Everybody thinks the internet's great.
Yeah, everybody.
The tools, you know, if we were more focused on building the tools, and then it's just like, don't violently enforce. Look, dude, you want to be Muslim and live under Sharia law in your little area? Look, if you can convince everybody in that area to be down with it and you're not going to use violence, unfortunately, Sharia law has violence embedded in it, just like every state does. But I think that that's what we're pushing for.
Right.
That's the message. The message is, it really is just back to the golden rule, man.
Lori said something interesting during the interview. She said that everybody's looking for a good or a bad. And I think it goes to, I'm trying to like put everything together during the show, but what I noticed is like, yeah, she's right. Everybody's looking for a good and the bad. And the truth is there's both in everything. So it really depends on, it's this kind of fine line of, you know, what's in between its experience. You know,
Perspective, yeah.
perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there is a good and a bad, obviously. Otherwise, one side wouldn't choose it.
Right.
I think what's really important is to try to see from the, and again, this is why principle over preference is so important, is because it's to acknowledge that someone has a preference.
Right.
But then you say, like, why? But what do you want underneath that? And fundamentally, what everybody wants is pretty much the same thing. They want to limit the amount of suffering in their life and the life of their loved ones. They want to try to live a good life.
They want to live a good life.
That's what people want. It's like the compassion exercise when Adam Williams was on the show, and we did a little compassion exercise, and you know, it's looking at that other person and saying, you know, this person is suffering and has pain just like me.
Yeah.
This person is trying to live a good life just like me. It's looking at other people and seeing that, and then realizing that it's not even about compromise. Like, and I think that that's the whole thing. It's not even about compromise. It's it's really about live and let live.
Yeah.
Like, let them make that decision. Okay, you think it's a mistake? Fine, you think it's a mistake. If it's a big enough mistake, let them make it. Let them make it. And if they make it enough times, they won't make it again. Is my camera going out?
That's awesome.
It's super, super, super hot in here. So, well, I mean, dude, I think we are coming in on the end of the show. We ended
Great
early.
show.
It's hot. We may need to get out of here early. We may need to deprive the people of maybe the last 10 minutes. So anyway, let me say thank you for the show today.
Yeah, thank you.
Great show. Let me say goodbye to the people. Well, thank you for joining us. We're going to get out of here a little bit early so that we can turn this AC back on. It is absolutely sweltering, and hopefully we'll figure this whole situation out for the coming weeks, or we'll just suffer through the summer. If you want to check out the archives of the show, actually now the best place to do that is vinarmani.com. We had been neglecting the site for a while. I had not made it a priority, but now you can go on vinarmani.com. Every single piece of content that we have made, from the full episodes down to the individual show segments, is all there. It's all searchable. It's all organized by interviews, by news, and it's updated automatically. So vinarmani.com, you can go and check out the archives there. But you can also, of course, subscribe at youtube.com/vinarmani or youtube.com/activistpost. That's where we put up all of the little bite-sized versions. And of course, please go and follow Activist Post at facebook.com/Activist Post to support independent media. We could not be doing what we're doing without them. And you can get your free issue of Counter Markets. You can still get that May issue of the Counter Markets newsletter, or you can wait a week if you still haven't gotten your free issue, and you can get the June issue for free. Countermarkets.com, trends and strategies for maximum freedom. You can check out the podcast on either iTunes or Stitcher. And so with that, we are going to turn on the AC and get cooled down a little bit. We will see you again next week, Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. Until then, stay free.